Well, hello everybody, and what I think is dawn. Hello everybody, welcome back to another Kamo's Automotive Radio Show. I'm your humble host, Mike Kamo, here on a Wednesday, here for episode 117 of the year, and I think it's 488. I missed one yesterday because we were I actually didn't think of anything to talk about. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why that actually, you guys don't need to, because you guys know Tuesday's usually my off days anyway on the radio show. Told you guys I would do one every day, but skip my mind. We were just having fun watching a movie, and I forgot. So, fun watching some holiday movies and stuff like that, and I forgot. So, hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the Kamo's Automotive Radio Show, Massachusetts Central Radio Show, the Vlog Corner, and also Kamo's Log. For those of you who have been here since day one, which a lot of you people have, or maybe not year one, but first couple of years. There's 58 of you who watch these now. I realized I didn't do a gear change show Saturday because I was celebrating my brother's birthday on Saturday, and I couldn't do it on Sunday because it was Christmas Eve / our holiday party, and I didn't want to do one on Christmas Day because I wanted to take just say thank you to you guys, and wish you guys a Merry Christmas. I'm going to do a gear change show early because I don't want to do one on Saturday. So I wanted to talk about something that I've wanted to tackle for the last couple of years, and something that us all in the automotive industry and some of us that cover cars will want to talk about. You guys want to know my thoughts on the automotive industry now and what I think. You guys want to probably know my thoughts on the automotive industry. You guys want to talk about. You guys want me to give you my thoughts on what's happened in the last couple of years, couple of decades since the 2009-2008 restructuring, when Obama practically retooled and helped remotivate the car companies, which is what I wanted him to do. Probably the only useful thing he ever did while he was president, technically, amongst other things. Getting Obamacare in there and getting mandated, motivating, something to motivate Americans to think better of their health and stuff like that, which is always important. It's always good when the government does it, but it's also so they can got tax money. So, but I just wanted to tell you guys what I feel about the automotive world, where I think it's heading. Now that we're entering 2024 and we got talks of hybrids and we got talks of electric cars, and it's in our future, most less likely, but it's not going to happen for another 10, 15 years. We probably won't see it happening for the next, we probably won't to the future, but I'll talk about that when I get to it. So where do I think our automotive industry stands, or where do I think the automotive world stands? I'm just not talking about America. I'm talking about America, Europe, and the Far East. So I'm talking about the European brands and the Far East brands. I'm talking about ones in Korea, Japan, and China. In Europe, I'm talking about the ones all over continental Europe, and also in the United Kingdom. And in America, I'm also talking about everything else. So where do I think all three all three countries, or three continents, all three automotive industries stand? Well, they're in a crossroads right now because fossil fuels will run out eventually, and we will eventually have to figure out a way how to minimize the use of fuel and renewable energy that's not going to be on coal, and how we're going to sustain ourselves when fossil fuels do run out at some point, maybe 30, 40, maybe 20, 30, maybe 40 years down the road, probably. I'm going to estimate that by 2065, I'm gonna estimate in 2065. So 40 years from now, I'm 34. 41 years from now, will be, yeah, I'm gonna say by 2065, we're gonna start to see fossil fuels dry up, and we're gonna start to see electric vehicles sort of come into their own and be fully fledged by then, because it took a while for the automotive industry to really gain strength in this country. You guys gotta remember, the first car ever made, and well, not just in this country, but also in Europe, the first cars ever to be made were made in like between 1886 and 1890 and 1894. Oldsmobile had their Doria runabout back in Ransom E. Olds made his first automotive offering in the late 1800s, 1880, 1890s-ish. The Germans already established their engine, the little patent wagon, in 1886. So the automotive industry started in 1886. It would take the automotive industry it would take our 1886, it would take our automotive industry it would take the automotive industry around the world to create the first, like, I'm going to say around 1900, between 1900 and 1920, it took the automakers to really put their engines on the market. Now, a lot of the engines back then were high displacement because no one knew, because a low displacement motor would use less fuel, but it wouldn't be able to crank out any horsepower. And because the efficiency of some of the technology and some of the manufacturing back then wasn't as good, so they had to build a bigger engine. May have not been more efficient, and it may not have used its fuel correctly, but automotive brands were able to get 50, 60, 70 horsepower. We're able to get 50, 60, 70 horsepower out of an engine that was about 7 liters. And at Indianapolis, if you guys watch my video there, you guys will know the maximum limit there was like was almost 10 liters, like 600 cubic inches or something like that. And they got, I don't know, 90, maybe 150 horsepower out of those cars. Those were race cars, though, back then. Pierce Arrow, I know at one point, made an 11-liter engine. And some of the other cars, like Cadillac, made 16-cylinder engines that were like 13, 14 liters, something like that. Because not a lot of people understood. And those engines weren't rough. They were buttery smooth. Cadillac, Pierce Arrow, Packard, they were all buttery smooth. They were well made and stuff like that. I think what really changed our automotive industry as a whole in the beginning was the Depression. The Depression brought upon new techniques, cars that could be mass produced, and cars that were more efficient, and cars that could actually be sold at a decent price. It wasn't until, I think, like the early 1940s that the average Joe could actually afford a car, like early 1940s, early 1950s, that the average Joe citizen could actually save up his money over a couple of years and buy a car, instead of walking or using a bicycle or riding the tramways, because in the early 1900s, because in the early 1800s, most most railroads and tramways were established, and and roads weren't really paved all that well, and the horse and buggy definitely wasn't going to do it because people were like, oh, we can't travel big differences or distances with a horse and buggy. The wheels break and everything else like that. So it was when the car came about that things changed. As in the early 1900s and the early 1920s, things were more affordable. People could travel distances. It really transformed how people, you got to remember the car also transformed how people thought and how people interacted in society as well. A lot of people are talking about this eco-friendly stuff right now and how everybody's like, oh, if you don't like hybrids or you don't like electric vehicles, if you don't want to save the planet, you're, there's some people out there that will look at a V8 muscle car. There's some people that were tainted by the education system into thinking, if we're not saving the planet, then we're not being mindful of everybody else. We're not being mindful of our fellow human beings. Well, we've been doing that forever. So it's not the first time that the automotive landscape has affected um, has affected our way of life, and because in the early 1900s, 1920s and early 1930s, the car sort of revolutionized how we got around, how we interacted with each other, how we did this, how our families grew, how our families grew and stuff like that. I mean, literally, when the car came out and people could buy them, young adults who were basically in their teens could work or borrow the family car, and they could go on dates. They could go out to the they could go out to the they could go out to the they could go to the theater, or they could go in town. They could go in town, or they could get out of the town and have get up to untold shenanigans away from their parents because they weren't relegated to being in town. It's sort of so it's not the first time that the automotive it's not the first time that the automotive industry and the changes have sparked changes in people's attitudes. Everybody says, oh, the whole EV and all this stuff, oh, you're not being economically sound. Those attitudes, those have been around for ages. The automobile has influenced America's way of thinking and its way of life ever since it came through. It also established our workforce. Thanks to Henry Ford, he was a little strict, but he came up with the working standards, and he also came up with the workable wage, so people could afford the cars, so people could live their lives. Well, Henry Ford was as tough and as stubborn as Henry Ford was. He actually helped revolutionize business as well. So, and over in Europe, same thing. It revolutionized culture. If we didn't have that, we wouldn't have cars like, we wouldn't have the flair of, we wouldn't have the industrial might of the Germans. We wouldn't have the hoi polloi pomp and circumstance that is with Ben today and Rolls Royce. We wouldn't have come up with, we wouldn't have the luxury standards from Bentley, Rolls Royce, Aston Martin, and we wouldn't have sports cars like Lotus and Austin Healey and Triumph and TVR. In Southern Europe, we wouldn't have Maserati, we wouldn't have Ferrari, we wouldn't have the automotive expression and the essence of the automotive, the heartbeat of the automotive world. So and plus over here in America, we wouldn't have speed and speed and loud noise and rah rah rah. So people usually, and of course over in the Far East we have the intellectually driven, sensible, practical minded, very industrial, smart Far East brains. So we wouldn't have all these things. Plus the other thing, we wouldn't have plus the media that we watch about cars. We wouldn't learn about drifting and high pitched tuner cars from Japan and Korea. We wouldn't know about the industrial sounding V12s and V8s and 6 cylinders and fuel injection from Germany. Or we wouldn't learn about the passion, and we wouldn't learn about the passion and the loud noise of Ferrari, the Italians. We wouldn't learn about the essence, the heartbeat of it, and of course, the energy, the flair, and then the badassery of the American automotive industry with its V8s and horsepower and no replacement for displacement. Big boomy V8s and our penchant for NASCAR. So, and plus each automotive industry, the Europeans came up with the endurance race. The Japanese, they came up with the high speed thrills of touring car racing, and the Americans wouldn't have come up with the open wheel and stock car dynasties that we have today. So the automotive industry has definitely shaped shaped us over. It will keep on energizing us, and and the changes will keep on coming. So what do I think about today's automotive industry? Well, I think it's clear we're going to go electric vehicle, and I'm going to think by 2065. So I'm going to say in another, 2023 is over. So I'm going to say in another 11 years, so I'm going to say another 41 years, we're probably going to be fully adjusted. And why do I say this? Well, the automotive industry, the might and the passion, the power, and the performance, and the efficiency, engineering, cost, it's all been done over time. And as I said before, cars weren't cheap when they first came out. Only certain people could afford them. When Henry Ford stepped in, the price of the car went down. People could afford to drive to and from work, and they didn't have to use the tramways. They didn't have to use their parents' cars, although in the 50s when they got, budgets started changing. People started using the family car and stuff like that. And then when they got on their own and they had enough money after they got home from college, or they worked really hard doing whatever they did, whether they were blue collar or they were untrained workers, they always found a way to do very good and earn new things. So, yeah, the automotive industry is definitely in a moment of transition. Why do I say it's going to take another 40 years for the automotive industry to get good? Well, based on history, the modern automobile and the way of life, like the first couple of cars, like you had the Austin, the first car, for those of you who don't know, Henry Ford made the four-wheel dream a reality. It was very expensive though. Thing is though, it wasn't the first one to ever do it. You had to still crank the thing over. It was difficult to operate. the Austin 7, made over in the UK. Thank the Brits, thank the British, thank the green tea drinking, biscuit eating boys from across the pond. We wouldn't have come up with the way how the car was supposed to be, and how complicated, and just a cheap, reliable car that didn't cost a heck of a lot of money, because Cadillac obviously got it right, but it was too expensive, it was too big, it was too unwieldy. It wasn't an every man's car. It was kind of expensive. Those of you who don't know, watch Jeremy Clarkson, the first car that actually looked like the real ones. And Jeremy and James may actually go through a list of cars, and they settle on the Aston 7. The Austin 7, not the Aston Martin, Austin, part of the British Leyland. And it was the car that started Jaguar, that started Lotus, and I believe started BMW in a way. I think they copied the Austin 7. And that was the first car I think it was like in the early 1900s. And it was like I think it was like the early 1900s that a car like that could actually set the basis for what the automotive industry was. And so that was early 1900s. I'm going to say the automotive industry. Now, the automotive industry has been around since the early 1800s. So the automobile has been around for almost, 1986 would be 100 years. And 86 was 37 years ago. So I'm going to say, the automotive industry was. So I'm going to say the automotive industry as a whole has been over 100, like almost 140 years old. So, and the automotive industry went through so many phases. We went through the high performance era, and then eventually things evened out. We got our sense about fuel economy and efficiency in the 70s. I'm going to say that the automotive industry I'm probably thinking that between 1930 and 1955, 1960 is when the automotive industry got its wings. So I'm going to say, it took, so 1886, 1906 would be another, 1906 would be 10 years, 1896 would be 10 years, 1906 would be 20 years, and then in the 1960s. So I'm going to say over 80 some odd years, the automotive industry probably gained its ground in probably the 1950s, and probably set the standard for what cars were, because we all know that that when Rolls-Royce, Bentley, Cadillac, and all those other ones came around, did the car start to really flourish. And I think it's around that time that we had we were kind of divisive on what the car was supposed to be and what it was going to become in the second half of the 20th century. And and we've been traveling on the EV path since 2007. So we're about 2017. Well, the Tesla Roadster first got introduced in 2007, so 2017 was 10 years after the first really successful electric vehicle ever got produced. And then 10 years, then that'd be 13, 2020. So 17 years. So the electric vehicle has kind of in that last 17 years, we've got different manufacturers. I think right now, I think there's close to, there's only a few models. I think there's maybe 10 to 20 models, maybe more in America. And I think there's a few over in Europe. And I know Japan is not fully on board with it, but they have a couple of EVs. I know. So in that 17-year span, we've sort of grown, and it will, in 2027, we'll have already been trying to go on the EV path for 20 years. So yeah, so I'm going to say by 2065, another 41 years, we'll already have been putting 60 plus years into the automobile. We're already put by 2027. I'm going to say between 2065 and 2070, we're probably gonna see the EV industry really change the landscape. That's a big industry, and big fuel companies will let that happen, we'll see. But yeah, that's the reason why I kind of think about that. Why I think like that. The other thing is, do I think this is the right direction? Yeah, it's kind of where we are. Kind of want to enjoy fossil fuels being burnt, so I don't want those to go away anytime soon, because it's good hearing a V8 or a V6 or V10 race car these days. People still race V10s with the Lamborghini, so people still run V8s, twin turbo V6s. I think what's happening is the Germans have always been technically driven, so they're going the turbo route with a lot of their cars. I mean, heck, their SL43 makes 370 horsepower from a 2-liter turbo. 2 liters. Now I know what you guys are saying. Well, there's tuner cars that could do 500-600 with that displacement. Well, those are tuned. Tuner cars are tuned, so it's different. That's stock. Is it the biggest displacement 4-cylinder? No. I think that went to a couple Indy racers back in the 1900s, but those cars only had 150, 200 horsepower, 250 horsepower somewhat. Those were Indy specials, or champ cars, as they called them back then. But yeah, because a 2-liter engine, a 2-liter 4-cylinder, if memory serves me correctly, they used to have a 253 cubic inch engine would be a 153 cubic inch motor would be like 2.5 liters or something like that, and that would be a Nova. You guys want to hazard a guess how much a 4-cylinder Nova had back in the 1960s? Just hazard a guess. I'll be silent for 2 seconds. Do I hear 100? Do I hear 120? Do I hear 130? Do I hear 140? Everybody's like, oh yeah, it's a 2.5 liter. Most of those have about 160, 170 horsepower. Most of them have 200 now, because the Civic has 200 of a 1.5. You guys be wrong. A 153 cubic inch Thrifty 4 in a Chevy Nova only made between 90 and 95 horsepower in 1961. That's it. Didn't make a horsepower more, horsepower less. That's it. That's all they made. So, and then everybody was like, oh, so then what did a 6-cylinder create? 6-cylinder in a Camaro. I want you guys to hazard a guess. How much a 230 3.8 liter cubic inch, 3.8 liter, 230 cubic inch straight six in a Camaro made back in 1967? Give her a guess. 200, 210, 220? Kicking the ass? No. I'm going to say between 150 to 160 from a 6. 6s weren't really known for their power back then, and you were lucky to get over 200 if you had a decent souped up one, I guess, from Pontiac maybe. Not that it mattered. Oh yeah, by the way, Pontiac tried to make a 2JZ back in 1967, 1968, and no one was ready for it. It failed, it flopped. It was a great thing. Oh yeah, by the way, it's also where they got the exhaust note for GTA, I believe, for all the cars. So, it's just kind of a straight 6. I mean, all the straight 6s, I think, sounded like that back then. But anyway, it was overhead cam. It was dual overhead cam. It was an overhead cam engine. It was dual overhead cam engine, 2 carburetor, 1 carburetor. I'm going to say probably 150, 200 horsepower, probably give or take. So, forget how many liters it was. I'll have to look it up. So they, I think it was just a single overhead cam. I think it was just an overhead cam, single overhead cam. I can't remember. It was either dual or overhead cam. I'll put the link in the description. I'll put that in the description tomorrow, I guess. So yeah, it's automotive industry came a long way, and I think I think that we're always trying to save the planet, try to come with something new, but there's a lot of challenges surrounding the whole EV thing, and there's a bunch of solutions that we don't have. So I don't know. So yeah, this is my honest thoughts. I think things are going all right for what they're doing. Things are a little high because of inflation, so there's nothing I can do about that. That's kind of in the background. Cars are getting expensive. They're getting expensive every single year because of all the technology we have to throw into them. Yeah, so I think things are I think we're in that transition period. We're not quite sure what we want to do, but obviously we're going to figure it out sooner or later. So, but yeah, I'm going to leave you guys with that. I'm going to upload this. Yeah, I think it's currently 12:30. It's currently 12:30. I've been talking to you guys for almost 34 minutes. So, just to let you know that, the automotive industry is not dying. We're going to go on in our normal ways when that time comes. So, don't fret, don't fear, and we'll carry on. So, I'll see you guys later, and don't go away. This might come over for the Gear Change Show. Here for episode 117 of the year. Peace out.